purpose of this video is simple. I want to show why Westcliff is an example of poor design. I will intentionally not talk about the erosion because even without it, one way is the most logical use of the space. Local surfer Nat Young posted about this on his Instagram, saying that he's in favor of two-way. The comments are really funny. It should remain a two-way street in my opinion. I hope it does. It just makes more sense. Leave it 2 lanes on Westcliff. Can't even believe this is a conversation. They always have to ruin good things. Hashtag leave it the way it was. Lame. Keep it as it is. The city of Santa Cruz first proposed a one-way pilot program for Westcliff Drive in February of 2023. This 2-year pilot project would have turned the eastbound lane of Westcliff Drive into a 2-way bike path while maintaining westbound vehicle traffic. People rushed to the streets in pure feats of joy. However, after backlash from the surrounding neighborhood, the city council voted against pursuing one-way, even though the majority of the city wanted this. We'll get back to the neighbors' concerns later, but let's first talk about good design. So whenever you build a space, the first thing that you need to know and think about is, what's the purpose of this place? Different users have different speeds, risks, and needs, so creating a strong hierarchy of who's important here is crucial. The lower priorities in spaces get punished in a way either through intentional friction or being cut out from the place entirely. An example of this would be indirect routing for cars in pedestrian environments like a downtown. Pedestrians and cyclists take the most direct route, while cars need to drive around places. God, I wish. So by understanding the purpose of a space, while also seeing who is suffering the friction, we can understand if there's a mismatch. And that brings us to Westcliff. What's the purpose of this space? What do people do here? What is this place for? It's such a stupid question because it's so obvious. It's not how do people get here, it's what do people do here. You guessed it, it's for human activities. People ride their bikes here, they walk here, they take their dog to the beach, they go surfing, whatever. This all sounds fine. But here's where things get weird, because according to its current design, cars are the top priority of the space. You can see it in how the space is divided, but even more telling is who is experiencing the friction. Pedestrians and cyclists are crammed together on the narrow multi-use path that's constantly overcrowded, especially on weekends. People are the ones navigating the stress. And cars have no friction. Nothing. Converting it to one-way with a dedicated two-way bike path would reset that hierarchy and finally put pedestrians and cyclists where they belong. Cars should suffer the friction, not people. Let me guess. The woke 15-minute city freaks want to utilize the rest of the road for bicycle lanes. I want to explore a Lookout article titled "One-Way Traffic on Westcliff Won't Help Anything" by Glenn Zeiler to try and understand why neighbors were so opposed to the pilot project. Glenn has 3 main arguments against one-way. Number 1, neighborhood spillover and congestion. Glenn writes, redirecting traffic into residential neighborhoods increases congestion and the potential for speeding. I swear, they're just creating more ways to make traffic worse. A one-way won't solve anything. I feel the same way. This was the neighborhood's biggest concern for one-way, and it kind of makes sense because people had experienced how bad it can get during the temporary closure. Based on that, many residents concluded that making Westcliff one-way would be a terrible idea. But here's where my view differs. What the temporary closure proved was how badly designed the neighborhood is. One-way should exactly be done because it will finally change the poor design of the neighborhood. If it's better designed, the increase in traffic won't be a problem. In fact, the neighborhood will be safer, more efficient, and more livable. But how in the world will that be done? Calm down, calm down. The city provided a map of initial traffic calming features that included roundabouts, turn wedges, and speed bumps that would be implemented in the surrounding neighborhood. This is a fantastic change and should be done, especially the roundabouts that'll make things so much better and help traffic flow. I'm looking at you, Bay and Westcliff. That intersection sucks. I'll get back to the neighborhood improvements later. Number 2, accessibility. He argues that removing a car lane would limit access for people who cannot bike or walk, such as the elderly, disabled, or those with mobility issues. He believes two-way car access is essential for equitable use. People can still get there by car. I don't know what he's talking about. Converting it to one-way helps accessibility because elderly and disabled people finally have enough space on the sidewalk. Crossings also become safer, especially for people who need longer to cross. The two-way bike path also improves accessibility for the people who can bike. Over time, more and more people will choose to bike to the beach, therefore reducing traffic for the people that actually need to drive. As alternative transportation gets more prioritized, this becomes more noticeable. Check this out.
In many Dutch cities, taking a bicycle is often the fastest way to get somewhere, because cyclists can usually take the shortest and most direct route, while drivers need to take the long way around. You might think that this is bad for drivers, but it's not, because if cycling wasn't faster, many of these people would be in cars, and the streets would be so clogged with traffic that the direct route would be even slower than the indirect route is today.
This doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but the only way to solve our traffic and safety problems is by prioritizing alternative transportation methods, like bikes. Number 3 is low bike data. He points to data showing that bike traffic on Westcliff is relatively low compared to car traffic. From his perspective, it doesn't justify removing a car lane to accommodate cyclists. With this kind of logic, the university would have never been built here. You build the university and then the students come. The data is more of an indication of how poorly designed this place is and actually supports the one-way argument. Glenn uses this data to prove that Westcliff is a major arterial road. Google says a major arterial road is a primary roadway within a city that carries a large volume of traffic between major destinations. They are often identified by speed limits, typically between 45 and 55 miles per hour. My 2 cents on the surrounding neighborhoods would be to look at the design speed and also to incorporate limited permeability.
Driving is a subconscious activity. As much as we'd like drivers to pay attention all the time, we would get exhausted if we had to always consciously focus on driving. And this is the fundamental problem with speed limits. Most people don't consciously think about what speed they're going. They're not obsessively checking their speedometer or reading every speed limit sign they pass. The vast majority of drivers will drive at whatever speed feels comfortable for the road they're driving on. This is what's known as the design speed of the road. And if that design speed doesn't match the posted speed limit, then we have a problem.
The core issue of the surrounding neighborhood is that the design speed is completely off. Many of these lanes are far too wide. Why would anybody drive slowly here? The city is trying to calm traffic without completely altering the physical cues that influence driver behavior. You're not really making it safer, but just sticking a couple of speed bumps in cars' ways. That mismatch continues the dangerous environment for people outside of cars and creates an awkward and confusing one for drivers. I mean, you see this way too often where people speed in between speed bumps or stop signs.
To be safe, the street must communicate the real level of risk to the driver. In other words, the driver must feel discomfort driving in a manner that is unsafe.
Rethinking space allocation and lane widths is essential. It's about designing the street so that safe behavior feels natural and intuitive. Family roots go back 150 years. Keep it 2 lanes and get to work. On to limited permeability. The biggest issue with the detour from the temporary closure was the cut-through traffic. Let's take this little section as an example. Look at every single street is open. There's no filtering, no barriers that discourage cut-through traffic. A better approach here would be limited permeability. That means strategically blocking certain streets, creating just 1 or 2 entry and exit points for each neighborhood. The result, drivers who don't live there stop using the neighborhood as a shortcut, so through traffic disappears. For residents, it might mean driving an extra minute to get home, but if your kid feels more safe playing in the driveway, who cares? This also has improvements on main roads like Delaware or Bay Street because you can remove some stop signs or reduce the number of intersections feeding into them. It's a small change, but has a lot of positive effects. One way would be establishing the correct hierarchy by making sure that humans come first and cars second. And that's why this is so important.
No, keep it the way it is.
It may seem counterintuitive, but designing to prioritize walking, cycling, and public transit actually works out better for drivers.
I don't think Glenn is upset about the bike path. I think Glenn is upset that the convenience of taking your car to Westcliff will be reduced. Glenn, there's a reason why the Netherlands has the happiest drivers and not the US. No, I forgot to talk about Eastcliff. They did one way and it works. Look it.
I loved when Eastside was 2 lanes. It is a nightmare now.